Welcome everybody. This is the second to last tutorial in the Global Game Jam Next series, Audio 101. So this is part 4 of 5. And in this one, what we're going to talk about is recording. We're going to talk about the equipment, we're going to talk about microphones, recorders, and connections. Then we're going to talk about metering and levels, which is related to clipping and distortion and getting clean recordings, and then we're going to do a little recording and editing in this tutorial. So the equipment, microphones and recorders. So generally the microphone picks up the sound, the recorder actually digitizes it so that we can use it in our games, and we're going to look at some of those. So you may or may not realize that you already have a couple microphones. Your computer has a microphone in it, your iPad, your iPhone, your Android device, your PC, your Surface, whatever it is, they all have microphones. It's how when you're Skyping or Google Hangouting or video chatting, it's how the other person can hear you. And can you use this microphone to record? Yes, in fact, I've done it many times on games, on actual professional games that I've released. Another microphone that you might want to consider using is the one that's in your headphones. Those are the headphones that I'm using right now, and they have a microphone built into them, and it doesn't sound too bad. Is it great? Well, it's not a terrific sounding mic, but it doesn't sound terrible either. And I think when you're getting started, a lot of people don't realize that it doesn't have to be high tech. But that being said, there are other kinds of microphones, and these are nice because they have USB connections. These are USB microphones, which means they plug right into your computer, and that audio editing programs like Audacity can record from them directly. So this is something that you might want to consider. Before USB mics came around, though, there was a different style of mic, and these are professional mics, and they have different connectors on them. So you can't plug these directly into a computer. Some of these are, the one on the left is fairly inexpensive at about $100. The one in the middle is quite expensive. It's a condenser mic, special type of microphone. And the one on the right is actually a shotgun mic, which is good for recording distance kinds of things and recording outside. And it actually has that thing that's right next to it. The microphone is the thing on the bottom, and the thing on top is actually what you put the microphone in. It's called a blimp, and it helps protect from the wind when you're outside. And there's a lot of, if you took those other two microphones outside to try and record, actually you'd have a tough time. You get a lot of wind noise in both of them. So those are professional mics. Now, moving on to recorders, what are you recording into? And you can record to your phone, you can record to your Mac, which is what I'm doing right now. You can plug a USB microphone directly into your laptop and record in Audacity and programs like that. And on Android and iOS, there are different applications to record as well. These are examples of professional portable recorders. I own the one on the left, the Zoom recorder. It's not that expensive. It's about $200 retail. And it allows me to kind of go out and record sound. And I could record on my phone too. The microphone, there are built-in microphones actually on that Zoom recorder, and it takes AA battery, so it's kind of nice and not super expensive. The one on the right is super expensive, and it's used more for like movies and other things. Now, connecting microphones to recorders. USB is what I just mentioned. Connecting via USB, it makes it very easy. But those professional mics, they use this other kind of connector called XLR. And in order for your XLR to get into your computer, because there are no XLR inputs on your computer, you have to go through an audio interface, which actually converts it to USB to get it into Audacity or a different program and things like that. So most commonly, you're going to be using USB microphones and or just the microphones that are right on your laptop itself. Okay, creating recording. Now this is the important part, is when you're recording, you want to get as clean recordings as possible. You want to get them at an appropriate level, and you want to adjust that level so the levels are loud enough but not too loud, because if you record it too loud, then you're going to get distortion and clipping. When it's too loud, those are the two things that happen, and we're going to show some examples of that. So what is your friend? Your friend is your meter. You want to look at your meter, and there are two types of meters. One are sort of the classic analog meters, which are on the left, and then the LED meters on the right. Now, both of these will have kind of an overload light, OL on the left, overload. When it's overloading, you're clipping, you're distorting, and there's no way to undo that later. If you distort, there's no way to kind of undo the distortion. So be careful. If you're peaking out on overload every once in a while, that's okay. But if you're always in the red and hitting that overload LED, that's not a good thing, and you want to stay away from that. So pull back on your levels, but make sure they're loud enough so that you're getting nice meter bouncing up and down. And so, test with your metering, right? This is a different type of meter, but you can see over right here, that's overloaded, and that will mean there's a set limit, and you can't go over that limit, otherwise it will distort. When recording dialogue or vocals, use a pop filter. It will take out the P's and the plosives. You'll get a lot of those. Those are similar to wind going directly on the microphone, so put a pop filter on them, and you're going to end up with better recordings. And pop filters are cheap, by the way. So let's take it for a spin. Let's check this out and actually bring up Audacity and play around with some of these meters. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Audacity here. So I put it in my dock. I think I put it in my dock. Here it is. I'm just going to record my voice and talk a little bit about it. So when I start recording, like just right now, I'm recording from my built-in microphone, and you can see that I'm hitting at about -12 here. Now if I shout really loud, you'll see I'm getting into the red, but I didn't actually overload. The overload LEDs haven't lit up yet. Now if I want to adjust that, if I bring the level meter up, if I bring the recording volume up, then I'm going to start clipping. And when I clip, you can see that I'm out of range. And we'll listen to this. And I'm going to talk really loudly for a minute, and we might hear a little distortion. It depends on what you're recording. All right, so I'm going to hit stop here. And then we're going to listen to a little bit of this back. So I want to pull back so that I wasn't hitting the overload on the input. Otherwise, you can see here how overloaded this is. It gets out of bounds. And literally, it's a hard cutoff. Let's listen to it. I'm going to turn down the playback just a little bit so it's not super loud. But you might hear some more distortion on this part. And I'm going to talk really loudly for a minute, and we might hear a little distortion. So on vocals, you might not hear it quite as much because my plosives, my P's and T's and things like that are hitting over. But sustained in the red or sustained overload, you're going to hear more of it. It depends on your speakers too. Like if you're just listening to this out of laptop speakers, you may not hear the distortion. But if you start listening more carefully, you'll start to hear that the signal is more distorted. Now sometimes you want distorted signal, right? But generally you don't want to start out with it that way. Like it's easy later to go, all right, I'm going to take this and I'm going to totally wildly distort it. And I can do that by doing something like I'm going to amplify it by 40 dB. Oh, can I do that? Allow clipping. Oh, that's cool. That's a feature. All right, so I'm going to allow clipping and watch what happens to the section, right? It just goes crazy. And now it's likely that we'll hear a lot of distortion. I'm going to turn it down so, but let's see. And it depends on what you record. See how it gets all fat and crunchy? And sometimes that's a good thing, but most people like to, there's no undoing it, right? I can undo it because I amplified it, and there's an undo feature in this. But if I recorded it that way, there's no undo. There's no going back from that, and there's no making it clean afterwards. So just make sure, I would say, get clean recordings and then do your distortion later if you really want to. Again, some simple editing. A lot of times you go in here and clean out what you want and what you don't want, little blips and things that you want to edit. Sometimes what I like to do is keep 2 tracks. So I'll have 1 track for the master, and then the best takes, like if a actor says something 3 times, then what I'll do is copy the best take and put it on a second track. So all my best takes are kind of organized on that second track. And then if I need to go back at some point, I have the original track, but then I have some of these other tracks that are still available to me. Then lastly, what I can do is I can export this. So if I have this little section, then there are different ways to export. I can export my selected audio, right, as opposed to the whole thing. If I export as WAV, it's going to export the whole 38-second piece. But if I export just the selected, it's going to take just what I've selected and export that as a WAV file. And so that's kind of useful. All right. So be careful with your levels. You know, have your person speaking into your microphone speak in the way that they will perform it, adjust the level, then record so that you're not overloading. And sometimes it's hard to do that, right? If I'm recording thunder and it hasn't thundered yet, you know, but I'll kind of guess that the level is going to be loud, so I'll kind of bring back the gain so I'm not overloading as best I can. Again, I'm Michael Sweet.